Started in BMX, I started as a father. I made, some bike frames in my garage. I, tinkering around doing something that I thought would be fun and exciting for my youngest, which is Craig. That was the beginnings of GT bicycles.
That's when we decided we were going to make our own bike. And Gary's a real good welder and, machinist and stuff. And he made the frame.
We were going to the BMX races. At that time, BMX tracks were pretty crude. They're pretty rough. This one particular track we went to was Corona Downhill, and it was actually truly a serious downhill. It had all the ruts and grooves in it. It wasn't manicured or smooth like the tracks today is. It was like racing in a plowed field. My brother was my other team rider, my brother Glenn, and we went up there, and they started the little kids about halfway up the hill, but they started the older guys at the top. My brother comes to me, that was his first time ever out there, and he come to me and he goes, Gary, he goes, you can't control them bikes at the bottom of the hill. He goes, by the time they get that kind of speed, he goes, they're out of control because they're choppy and they're bouncy. Solid, rigid bike.
I seen Stuart out there at the track, and he had a Monoshock. I wanted one. Next thing I know, I was talking to Gary about it, and Gary went over and talked to Stuart.
I had gotten, 2 Yamaha motorbikes, one from winning the pre-qualifier race in San Diego, and then I got another one when I won the Yamaha Gold Cup at the Coliseum. I turned it into a Monoshock. Took some welding classes in high school. My dad taught me to weld, so I just upgraded everything I could on my bike. Made a swing arm for it and put the shock between the two tubes that were up on top and rebrazed stuff and just tried to make it bigger. I actually welded an American bottom bracket in. I took the collared one out and welded in an American bottom bracket. But it was like pretty weak because, I just using a gas acetylene torch and I think I might have done one to a Schwinn Stingray too. So it was, I just tinkered in the garage.
Stuart's was all gas filled and it cracked and had a lot of problems with it.
It was a mess. Going, to Yarnell and all these cool downhill tracks and racing with Tom Lund and him with his drilled out Monoshock, and I just thought that was the coolest bike ever. So I'm like, I'm going to make one like his. So I took some drafting classes in high school and some college classes, so I kind of knew how to draft. So I just, got some drafting paper and designed this, bike that was very similar to the one that Tom Lund was riding.
We raced Western Sports Arena on Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning. And Stuart was always there. Gary talked to Stuart, and they sat down and designed up this bike.
We would go after the races and hang out at Gary's house in his garage, and, he was fabricating, drag cars and stuff like that. So he had all the cool welding, TIG welding, and arc welding, and Keeley arc welding, and all that stuff. So he had that knowledge. And I said, Gary can make stuff. So I took it over to Gary and rolled it out and said, hey, can we make this bike? And he says, yeah, I don't see why not.
I set it up and I built a suspension bike, but it was a 20-inch BMX bike, and it had a shock in it. Made it all out of square tubing so it'd be square.
I actually remember sitting at the welding table, and it says, here, put a couple, beads of welding on it so you can say that you helped build it. So, I actually put the mask on and, did the little bead the wire and, weld. I don't remember exactly what piece I welded. I think it was probably part of the swing arm.
And took a Coney motorcycle shock. I scared up a set of motor mags because I figured we were going to be trashing some wheels. So I got some motor mags, and then I found at a bike shop, I found an old bike that Yamaha made. They used to call them a Yamaha moto bike. And I got the fork off of it, and then I whacked the fork off and extended it so I could get more travel out of it.
When you put it together, it set way down in front. And the pedals would come around and click around with it. So Gary had made up like little plugs to go on the top. Went in, welded them, and then returned it down. They were like 2 inches taller. Welded them in, and it said everything level on it.
When you look at mine and you look at theirs, there's differences.
I had Big White, that was a Tony D plastic front fender, and he was a big factory motorcycle racer for Suzuki at the time. And I got it, and we cut it, and did everything, sanded it, and, put it on, made the front forks, fit in. And what we cut off the fender, we made a little back fender for it. It looked just like a Honda Elsinore, and it was actually had more travel in the front suspension and back than an Elsinore did.
That was my first build of a suspension bike. So we took that out there, and my brother raced it, and he kicked everybody's butt.
We built that one, and I went out and took it to escape country. I guess because it's so heavy, it would just like stick to the track. I mean, you fly down through there.
The next thing I know, I said, well, I'll build you guys.
Stuart got one, I got one, and these 2 kids I went to school with bought it. The other 2.
I raced it a lot at Corona. Dennis Dane rode it a heck of a lot more than I did. He actually had possession of it for probably 5 or 7 years. I finally just said, hey, dude, I want my Monoshock back.
Last time I seen it was in his factory over there off of Harbor Boulevard in Santa Ana, it was up in the attic above some offices.
And I actually started restoring it, believe it or not, in the early 90s. I took it and I stripped it, and I was going to put because it was beat up and everything, and I ended up repainting the frame. And the cool thing about the restoration of it is that I actually had everybody that was the original guy. It was painted back in the day when we first started painting BMX frames at GT bikes. We used a company called Aquarian. We found out about them because they were painting mongoose. So that's where we went, to Aquarian. Well, they're here in Orange. And so Ron painted that bike for me. And so when I stripped it and had it blasted and everything, Ron repainted it at Aquarian. So it's done that. I still have the original Moto Mags, Simi Moto Mags. I have the original Ching Shin tires on it. I found a set of original Ching Shins and I put them back on there. It's got the Astrobula cranks. It's got the everything. I put everything. The only thing I could not get back original was the saddle. I had taken a piece of wood and had it upholstered, a little long square seat. I had used some little pieces of angle iron. I bolted on there and clamped it and made it like a clamp onto the top tube, so you could move it back and forth. And it had deteriorated and rotted, and the wood had broken and all that. So that's the only original new piece on the bike. Everything else is original to that bike. I only built because the guys that truly wanted them. I ended up building a total of 6 suspension bikes. The one I had for my brother and 5 more. And fast forward 46 years later, 46 years later, I know where all 6 of them still are. Guys that have them have reconnected with me and brought them and showed them to me. They've never turned them loose. Stuart said, I'll never sell mine. We do old school bike shows. He actually brought it last year to one of the old school shows because I set mine out there and he brought his and set it there and we had them sitting side by side. But that was kind of cool for 45 years later.
Over behind the Fullerton Courthouse, there used to be a big field, and all the houses were built up on a hill behind it. And we used to start out on that hill, coast down, you'd kind of go in a drainage ditch, and you would come off of that. It was 25, 30 feet in the air, and you would jump off of it. Most of the guys were flying halfway, 3/4 of the way. I flew almost to the bottom every time on that. And that was where I took my Monoshock over there to play every day after school, because it was right around the corner from Fullerton High School. There's
some pictures or video that my dad took of me racing. I think it was at the Walnut BMX track, and I'm jumping it after the races. I'm wearing my corduroy long pants and I'm shirtless with no helmet and jumping over the first or second jump, and I had a blowout in front, the back tire blew out, and I just kept riding it, just took the tube out and let the rim sit between the tire beads and just kept jumping it because it was so forgiving.
I had a great time riding and going to the races, and just a lot of fun.
How proud are you that your name, company name, provided bikes for thousands of racers to realize their dreams, and millions of people of all ages enjoyed bicycling because of your products, the company's products?
Like I tell people, I've been doing this for 46, 47 years, and I never stop feeling good when somebody comes up and pats me on the back and tells me what they thought. I think there's a hell of a lot of credit there when you look at some of these bikes that are 40 years old and are still around. It's not building obsolescence, they're still riding these things or still fixing them up and being really proud of them. This is 40 years later, and so it makes me extremely proud to have been part of that. I'm no longer with GT, but it doesn't mean that I'm not going to bleed blue and yellow, because that was team colors forever.